November 16, 1957, Plainfield, Wisconsin. Officers step onto the frozen dirt of Ed Gein's farmhouse. Bernice Warden vanished. Her blood stains the hardware store floor. They suspect Ed.
The door creaks open. No power. Flashlights cut through the gloom. Inside, the air is thick. Rotting meat. Unwashed skin. Something worse.
Room by room, the horror unfolds. A mask, human skin, stitched with precision. A bowl, carved from a skull. The stench of decay clings to everything.
The kitchen. Bones, femurs, ribs, vertebrae. No order, just chaos. A woman's face, hollow eyes, stretched over a mannequin.
Gein's world, a grotesque museum. The officers reel. Minds struggle to comprehend. This is not madness. This is Ed Gein. In the annals of American crime, certain names echo with a resonance that chills the bones. Ed Gein, known to some as the Butcher of Plainfield, to others as the Plainfield Ghoul, occupies a place of infamy, a specter that haunts the shadows of history. His deeds unspeakable, his psyche a labyrinth of horror. To understand the depths of Gein's depravity, one must traverse the corridors of his past. Born to a mother whose iron will and puritanical fervor dominated his existence, Ed's world was one of isolation, his mind a fertile ground for the seeds of madness. Augusta Gein, a woman of unyielding faith, preached the evils of the flesh, casting women as harbingers of sin. In her eyes, only she was pure, and her son her disciple.
The farmhouse. It was a mausoleum. Rooms filled with relics of a twisted devotion. In the parlor, a shrine to Augusta, her image everywhere, her presence palpable.
Gein's isolation from the outside world was nearly complete. With his mother as his only companion, his world shrank to the confines of their Plainfield home. Books on anatomy and death became his solace, his education. As Augusta's health waned, Ed's dependence on her grew, entwining his identity with her oppressive presence. When she passed, the void left behind was suffocating.
He was always different, kept to himself mostly. After his ma died, he just unraveled. Started talking to himself, they said. Spent hours in the cemetery.
The cemetery. A place of rest for most, but for Gein it was a hunting ground. His nocturnal visits were not of mourning, but of desecration. He exhumed the bodies of women, seeking to resurrect his mother in a grotesque facsimile. The lines between life and death blurred, his mind constructing a macabre tapestry of skin and bone.
We found masks, human skin. He wore them, became them, an attempt to crawl back into the womb.
Gein's mental deterioration was complete, his actions an unholy communion with the dead. The farmhouse, a stage for his delusions, a place where the boundaries of sanity and madness lay shattered. Yet, amidst the horror, he remained unassuming, a specter in plain sight. As the investigation unfolded, the true scale of Gein's atrocities emerged, each discovery more grotesque than the last. Yet, in the end, it was not the horror of his acts that lingered, but the chilling realization of a mind untethered from reality, a man lost to the shadows of his own making. The Butcher of Plainfield was, in truth, a prisoner of his own haunted past.
In those walls, you could feel it, the weight of his madness, the silence, not of peace, but of a life twisted beyond recognition.
The tale of Edward Theodore Gein begins, as many stories do, in the innocence of childhood. Yet his was a childhood steeped in shadows. Born in La Crosse County, Wisconsin, Ed was the second son of George and Augusta Gein. The family relocated to a 155-acre farm in Plainfield, a place as isolated as the family itself. The land was vast, stretching into the horizon. Yet it was a prison of sorts, a fortress where Augusta could rule without interruption, her puritanical beliefs casting long, oppressive shadows over her sons. The wind whispered through the fields, carrying with it the suffocating weight of Augusta's relentless sermons.
Augusta had a voice that could pierce the very soul. Her influence was absolute, her word law. She preached of the world's evils, of women as instruments of sin, and Ed, impressionable and eager to please, absorbed every word. He was a child adrift in a sea of moral absolutism, taught to see the world through a lens of fear and revulsion.
Inside the farmhouse, time seemed to stand still. The rooms were filled with a silence that was not of peace, but of judgment, the walls echoing Augusta's fervent diatribes. Ed's brother Henry would sometimes question their mother's teachings, but Ed never did. To him, Augusta was infallible, her word gospel. The air within those walls was stale, heavy with the scent of old wood and the unyielding presence of a mother's iron will.
You could feel it in the air, the way it clung to your skin like a cold sweat. The farm was a place where dreams withered, where the only escape was into the recesses of one's own mind.
Augusta's death in 1945 marked the beginning of Ed's descent into madness. Her passing left a void, a chasm that swallowed him whole. Alone on the farm, Ed was a specter, a man adrift in a world without anchor. The isolation was palpable, a living entity that wrapped itself around him, squeezing tighter with each passing day.
In the years following Augusta's death, Ed's behavior became increasingly erratic. He withdrew from the world, his interactions with others growing sparse and tinged with an unsettling intensity. The farmhouse, once a place of oppressive order, descended into chaos, rooms filled with the detritus of a mind unraveling.
The loneliness was absolute, consuming. Ed filled the void with macabre pursuits, his fixation on his mother transforming into an obsession with the female form. It was an obsession born of longing and revulsion, a grotesque manifestation of a life twisted by isolation and indoctrination.
The farm was a mausoleum, a monument to a life unfulfilled. The weight of Ed's madness bore down on the land, inescapable, suffocating.
Ed Gein's story is one of darkness, shaped by a childhood steeped in fear and control. The shadows of his past stretched long, casting their influence over his actions, leading him down a path of horror and infamy. In the silence of the farmhouse, one can almost hear Augusta's voice, a lingering echo in the halls of a mind forever trapped in the grip of a mother's legacy. And so the tale continues, a chilling journey into the depths of a mind lost to madness, where the boundaries between life and death were blurred and the echoes of a twisted childhood reverberated through the annals of true crime history. In the shadowed heart of Wisconsin, beneath the unyielding gaze of an indifferent moon, Ed Gein's journey into the macabre began its dark descent. The soil of Plainfield, once a serene cradle for the departed, became a canvas for his morbid artistry. The boundaries of decency and desecration were shattered as Gein's hands unearthed the secrets buried deep within the earth. The cemeteries of Plainfield stood silent, their gravestones weathered by time, oblivious to the sinister rituals that unfolded beneath the shroud of night. Here, Gein roamed with a macabre purpose, driven by an insatiable compulsion to resurrect his obsession. His footsteps, light yet deliberate, were the prelude to an act that defied the sanctity of death. Bodies, once laid to rest, were torn from their eternal slumber, their peace disturbed by a man who saw them not as remains, but as raw material for his grotesque creations. The trophies he fashioned from these stolen cadavers were as chilling as they were unimaginable. Human skin, meticulously preserved, was transformed into masks that Gein wore, a desperate attempt to bring his mother back to life, if only in visage. Skulls became bowls. Rib bones served as grotesque embellishments, each piece a testament to the darkness that had consumed his soul. In these acts, Gein's fractured mind found solace, a perverse communion with the dead that blurred the lines between memory and reality. Yet, amid this horror, Plainfield remained eerily calm, its residents blissfully unaware of the atrocities that lurked beneath their feet. The town, with its quaint facades and quiet streets, bore no hint of the nightmare that had taken root within its soil. It was a place where the ordinary masked the extraordinary, where the mundane concealed the monstrous. Gein's world was one of shadows and silence, a realm where the dead spoke louder than the living, their stories etched in bone and skin. In this twisted reality, Gein's nightly excursions became ritualistic, a dance with death that defied the natural order. The air, thick with the scent of decay, clung to his skin as he worked, his mind a labyrinth of madness from which there was no escape. Each grave he robbed was a step further into the abyss, each body a piece of the puzzle he sought to complete. The horror of his actions lay not just in their execution, but in the cold, calculated precision with which they were carried out. And so the horror grew, a festering wound hidden beneath the tranquil surface of Plainfield. The town, a mere backdrop to Gein's grotesque theater, remained oblivious, its inhabitants unaware of the darkness that thrived in their midst. It was a darkness that would one day come to light, revealing the true extent of Gein's depravity and the chilling reality that beneath the veneer of normalcy, evil had taken root. In the end, it was not just the bodies that were unearthed, but the very soul of a town, forever changed by the horrors that lay buried beneath its soil. In the hushed corners of Plainfield, Wisconsin, the air carried a chill that seemed to seep into the very bones of its residents. The small town, nestled amidst the barren landscapes of the Midwest, was a place where everyone knew each other, where secrets were whispered but seldom believed. Yet even in such a close-knit community, the disappearance of Mary Hogan on a cold December day in 1954 sent ripples of fear and disbelief through the town. Mary Hogan, the vivacious owner of a local tavern, was a woman larger than life, both in presence and spirit. Her sudden absence was felt like a void, her laughter now a haunting echo in the minds of those who frequented her establishment. It wasn't just her disappearance that rattled the community, it was the gruesome scene left behind.
The tavern was a macabre tableau. Blood splattered across the bar, a trail leading to the back door that opened to the unyielding darkness of the woods. There were no signs of a struggle, no witnesses to recount the last moments of Mary Hogan's life. It was as if the earth itself had swallowed her whole, leaving nothing but questions in its wake.
For 3 years, her case remained unsolved, a specter that haunted the town, until the chilling confession of Ed Gein brought the truth to light. In the stark, clinical environment of the interrogation room, Gein spoke with a calmness that belied the horror of his words.
He described how he had shot Hogan in the head, her body limp and lifeless as he dragged it to his truck. The details were recounted with a detachment that turned the stomachs of even the most seasoned officers.
In Gein's words, there was no remorse, only a chilling indifference, as if he were describing a mundane chore. He spoke of taking her body back to his farmhouse, a place that would soon become infamous for its grotesque contents. The farmhouse, a decrepit structure standing alone against the vast expanse of farmland, was a place of unimaginable horror. Inside, the air was thick with decay, the walls silent witnesses to the atrocities committed within. It was here that Ed Gein's dark legacy began to take shape, his actions transforming him from a mere suspect into a figure of infamy.
Mary Hogan's murder was but the first in a series of revelations that would lay bare the depths of Gein's depravity. As the community grappled with the horror of his crimes, the man they had once known as a quiet, if peculiar neighbor, was unmasked as a monster.
The world watched in morbid fascination as the details of Gein's life unfolded, each revelation more shocking than the last. His notoriety grew, a dark shadow that stretched far beyond the borders of Plainfield, casting a pall over the collective consciousness of a nation. In the end, it was not just the gruesome artifacts found within his home that cemented his place in history, but the realization that evil can lurk beneath the most unassuming of exteriors. Ed Gein's name became synonymous with the grotesque, a cautionary tale of isolation, madness, and the terrifying potential that lies within the human psyche. As the investigation into Bernice Warden's disappearance unfolded, the small town of Plainfield found itself at the epicenter of a nightmare. What began as a routine inquiry into a missing person quickly spiraled into a chilling uncovering of unspeakable horrors. The local police, led by Sheriff Art Schley, had initially approached the case with the hope of a straightforward resolution, but as they delved deeper, the evidence began to weave a tapestry of dread that none could have anticipated.
We found Bernice's cash register receipt, the last transaction she made before vanishing, pointing directly to Ed Gein. The trail led us to his isolated farmhouse, a place that would soon reveal the darkest facets of human depravity.
Inside the farmhouse, the air was stagnant, heavy with the scent of decay and the oppressive weight of secrets long buried. The dim light struggled to penetrate the gloom, casting long shadows that seemed to dance mockingly on the walls. As the investigators moved through the cluttered rooms, each step uncovered more evidence of Gein's ghastly activities.
The mounting evidence against Gein was overwhelming. We cataloged a staggering array of human remains, each item more macabre than the last. His collection included masks made from human skin, bowls crafted from skulls, and other grotesque artifacts that defied comprehension.
As word of the investigation's findings spread through Plainfield, the community's fear and suspicion grew exponentially. Neighbors who had once viewed Gein as an eccentric recluse now recoiled in horror at the thought of what lay just beyond their own backyards. The realization that such monstrosities had been committed under their noses shattered the illusion of safety that the rural town had long cherished.
We couldn't believe it. Ed was a man we all knew, or at least we thought we did. To think that he was capable of such horrors, it changed everything.
The fear that gripped Plainfield was palpable, a living force that seeped into every corner of the town. Parents held their children closer, people locked their doors earlier, and whispers of Gein's atrocities echoed in hushed conversations. The community, once tight-knit and trusting, found itself fractured by the revelations, forever haunted by the specter of Ed Gein's depravity.
In the wake of the investigation, we were left with more questions than answers. How had such darkness taken root in the heart of a man? And how had it festered so long unnoticed?
Ed Gein's legacy is one of horror and disbelief, a grim reminder of the depths to which human depravity can sink. The investigation into his crimes peeled back the layers of his madness, revealing a mind twisted by isolation and obsession. And as the community grappled with the aftermath, they were left to confront the unsettling truth that monsters do not always lurk in the shadows. Sometimes they live next door. The sound of the gavel fades into the eerie silence of the farmhouse, a place where the air is thick with the scent of decay, and the shadows cling to the walls like a second skin. This is the heart of Ed Gein's twisted world, a place where the line between the living and the dead has been irrevocably blurred. Stepping into the farmhouse is like crossing a threshold into madness itself. The wooden floorboards creak underfoot, each step echoing in the hollow silence. The walls are adorned with grotesque trophies, macabre creations fashioned from the remains of the dead.
It's hard to describe the feeling of walking through those rooms. Every corner you turn reveals another horror, another testament to Gein's depravity.
In the dim light, the true horror of Gein's craftsmanship is laid bare. A lampshade made from human skin casts a sickly glow, illuminating a room where the air is thick with the metallic scent of blood. The furniture is adorned with human bones, meticulously arranged in patterns that defy reason. Each artifact tells a story, a chilling narrative of obsession and madness. A belt crafted from female nipples, a collection of noses preserved in jars, and the infamous mask made from the skin of a woman's face. These are the remnants of Gein's victims, their identities lost to his morbid fixation.
It's It's as if he was trying to build a world of his own, a place where he could be in control. But it's a world built on horror, on the suffering and desecration of others.
The farmhouse is more than just a crime scene. It is a monument to Gein's descent into insanity. Each room is a reflection of his fractured psyche, a place where his darkest fantasies were brought to life.
We had to piece together not just the physical evidence, but the psychological puzzle of a man who saw nothing wrong in what he did. In Gein's mind, this was his reality, his sanctuary from a world that he felt had abandoned him.
Psychologists who studied Gein described him as a man deeply influenced by his domineering mother, Augusta. Her puritanical beliefs and oppressive control shaped his view of women and the world. Her death left a void that he tried to fill through his gruesome acts, blurring the lines between life and death in his mind.
To him, wearing the skin of a woman was a way to bring his mother back, to feel her presence once more. It was a twisted homage to the only person he ever truly loved.
The psychological profile of Ed Gein paints a picture of a man trapped in a cycle of obsession and grief. His actions were not just crimes, but cries for help from a disturbed mind. In his isolation, he created a world where he could be both the creator and destroyer, the master of life and death.
It's hard to fathom how someone could live like that, surrounded by the evidence of their own depravity. But to Gein, it was all perfectly normal, a testament to the power of his delusions.
As investigators sifted through the horrors of the farmhouse, they were left with more questions than answers. What drove Ed Gein to commit such atrocities? Was he a product of his environment, or a monster born from his own twisted desires? The answers may never be fully known, but the legacy of his crimes continues to haunt the town of Plainfield, a grim reminder of the darkness that can lurk within the human soul. The year was 1968, a time when the echoes of Ed Gein's atrocities still reverberated through the quiet streets of Plainfield. The courtroom was a stark contrast to the chaos of his mind, a place where order sought to make sense of madness. Ed Gein, the man whose name became synonymous with horror, sat quietly, his demeanor betraying no hint of the monstrous acts he had committed.
In the courtroom, the air was thick with anticipation. Gein's confession to the murders was not just an admission of guilt, but a chilling glimpse into a mind devoid of remorse. He spoke of Mary Hogan and Bernice Warden as if recounting a mundane chore, his voice flat and emotionless.
His words painted a picture of horror that was almost too surreal to comprehend. The public, already reeling from the grisly discoveries at his farmhouse, was left grappling with the reality that such evil could reside in one of their own.
The media frenzy that ensued was akin to a feeding frenzy, with journalists descending upon Plainfield like vultures. Headlines screamed of "the butcher of Plainfield," and the small town was thrust into the national spotlight, its name forever linked to Gein's heinous acts.
The trial was more than just about justice. It was a spectacle, a macabre theater where the audience sought to understand the depths of Gein's depravity. Yet, as each day unfolded, it became apparent that understanding was as elusive as sanity in the mind of a madman. The psychological analysis presented in court offered a chilling insight into Gein's psyche. Experts described him as a man trapped in a labyrinth of his own making, where the lines between fantasy and reality were irreparably blurred.
He was not merely a product of his environment, but a cautionary tale of what happens when the mind is left to fester in isolation and obsession. The courtroom, with its stark walls and unforgiving lights, served as the backdrop for a narrative that was both tragic and terrifying.
As the trial drew to a close, the weight of Gein's crime settled like a shroud over the community. The verdict, though inevitable, did little to alleviate the lingering fear that such darkness could exist.
The judge's gavel fell, sealing Gein's fate, yet the echoes of his actions would persist long after the courtroom had emptied. Plainfield would never be the same, its innocence forever tainted by the specter of Ed Gein.
In the end, the trial of Ed Gein was not just about a man, but about the darkness that can reside within us all. It served as a grim reminder of the thin veneer of civility that separates us from the abyss. The legacy of Ed Gein lives on, not as a cautionary tale, but as a chilling testament to the horrors that can arise from the depths of the human soul. The legacy of Ed Gein is a specter that looms, a shadow that refuses to fade with time. It is a narrative etched into the very fabric of horror itself, a macabre tapestry woven from the threads of human skin and bone. As investigators first stepped into the farmhouse, the air was acrid, a testament to the atrocities concealed within. The dim light barely pierced through the grime-encrusted windows, casting long skeletal shadows across the cluttered floor. Among the most disturbing artifacts was a collection of masks, each one crafted with a grotesque expertise that belied the madness of their creation. These masks, fashioned from the skin of his victims, were not mere trophies, but manifestations of Gein's twisted homage to his mother, Augusta. Each mask bore the lifeless gaze of its previous owner, frozen in a silent scream, forever held captive in Gein's perverse gallery. But it was the sheer scale of his collection that left investigators reeling. In every corner of the farmhouse lay the remnants of his dark craft: bowls made from skulls, furniture upholstered with human skin, and a belt fashioned from nipples. These were not merely the tools of a killer, but the artifacts of a man who had lost his grip on reality, blurring the line between the living and the dead.
Walking through that house was like stepping into the mind of a madman. Every artifact told a story of unspeakable horror, a testament to the depths of human depravity.
The discovery of Gein's grotesque collection sent shockwaves through the small town of Plainfield and rippled far beyond its borders. It was a revelation that transcended the boundaries of crime, seeping into the cultural consciousness, inspiring tales of terror that would haunt the public imagination for decades. The full extent of his crimes became a macabre muse for filmmakers and authors alike, birthing characters that would become icons of horror. From Norman Bates in Psycho to Leatherface in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the influence of Gein's nightmarish deeds was undeniable. These stories, rooted in the reality of Gein's madness, served as a chilling reminder of the thin veil that separates fiction from the grotesque truth. Yet, even as his crimes faded into history, the fascination with Gein's legacy only grew. His gravestone, a morbid artifact in its own right, became a target for those drawn to his infamy. Stolen repeatedly from the cemetery, it was a symbol of the enduring grip his story held on the public psyche, a macabre reminder of the darkness that lurks in the human soul. In the end, Ed Gein's story is not just one of horror, but of the profound and unsettling fascination with the monstrous. It is a legacy that continues to haunt, a chilling testament to the shadows that dwell within us all. As we turn away from the grotesque echoes of the past, we are left to ponder the darkness that resides in the human heart and the thin veneer that separates us from the abyss. As the dust settled over Plainfield, the community found itself grappling with an unspeakable horror that had unfolded in their midst. The revelations of Ed Gein's crimes had shattered the town's veneer of normalcy, leaving behind a landscape marred by fear and suspicion. Families locked their doors with newfound urgency, whispers of paranoia seeping into the fabric of daily life. The air was thick with an intangible dread, the kind that clings to the skin and lingers in the shadows. In the aftermath of Gein's arrest, Plainfield became a place defined by its ghostly silence, a community in mourning for the innocence it had lost. The small town streets, once familiar and comforting, now bore the weight of unspeakable secrets. Children were kept indoors, their laughter stifled, replaced by the quiet murmur of adults sharing hushed conversations about the man who had lived among them, unnoticed and unchallenged.
You could feel it, in the air. It was like the whole town was holding its breath, waiting for something else to happen, something worse.
The cultural impact of Ed Gein's atrocities extended far beyond the borders of Plainfield, seeping into the collective consciousness of a nation. His grotesque legacy inspired a macabre fascination, birthing an entire genre of horror that drew from the well of his depravity. Iconic characters like Norman Bates and Leatherface emerged from the shadows of Gein's twisted exploits, their stories echoing the real-life nightmares he had wrought. Yet, this fascination was not confined to fiction. Across the country, a morbid curiosity took root, drawing people to the scenes of Gein's crimes like moths to a flame. Tourists descended upon Plainfield, eager to glimpse the house that had been a theater of horrors, their presence a stark reminder of the thin line between intrigue and insensitivity.
We had to deal with them, the gawkers and the thrill seekers. They came here wanting to see the place where it all happened, not caring about the pain it caused the people who lived here.
But perhaps the most enduring element of Gein's dark legacy is the continued fascination with his story, a fascination that has endured through the decades. This was epitomized by the repeated theft of Gein's gravestone, a bizarre and unsettling act that seemed to encapsulate the enduring hold he had on the public imagination. Each time it was stolen, it served as a grim reminder of the enduring shadow cast by his crimes.
It's like he never really left, you know? His gravestone kept disappearing, like people wanted to take a piece of him with them, like they wanted to keep that darkness alive.
In the end, the story of Ed Gein is one that refuses to fade into obscurity. It is a tale woven into the fabric of American folklore, a chilling reminder of the depths of human depravity and the lasting scars left on those who live in its wake. As the years pass, the echoes of his crimes continue to reverberate, a haunting legacy that serves as both a cautionary tale and a macabre fascination.